Hey guys, welcome to the Kratos Medical Podcast. As you can see from my surroundings, I'm not in my typical area. I am in California at the moment, and behind me, just off to the side there, you can see the Padres baseball stadium just behind me. So I'm in very good surroundings today. There's an often commonly held belief that if you start exercising, then your appetite is going to increase. So I was trying to find some research that kind of looked into this and whether or not this is true. And what, if it is true, what can be done to mitigate it. Those of you who've done any sort of level of research into this on fat loss will know that it's dependent on your energy intake and your energy expenditure. So that is what you're taking in the form of calories and what you're expending in the form of your exercise, okay? We've got really, really well-controlled studies that show that increases in exercise can bring about a reduction in adipose tissue, i.e., if you increase your amount of exercise, you can reduce your body fat. Now, it's not quite as simple as that. However, the studies have shown that a moderate increase in exercise from being sedentary to doing some exercise has been shown to be proven benefit in terms of reducing adipose tissue, and usually that's around organs, which is where we don't want it. So not the stuff that's going to hang over your genes, but this is the stuff that sits on your organs, okay, which is bad. And the studies also show that people who are, for example, fat, who are doing exercise, are going to come out healthier than people who are skinny and doing no exercise, i.e. they're sedentary, okay? So we know that exercise is really good for preventing a lot of health issues in the long term, okay? Things like heart disease, diabetes. We also have some studies that show that when we introduce exercise into a sedentary population, some of them start to lose adipose tissue and some of them don't. So in the studies, there was sometimes a 3 times gap between the people who had started exercising and lost some weight and the people who started exercising didn't, and in fact some of them even gained. So it's thought that this was to do with the way in which the exercise impacts on people's appetite and their eating habits. So I looked into this in a bit more depth. The question being, does our energy expenditure, i.e. when we are exercising, therefore increase our desire to eat or increase the action on energy intake? So is it stimulating us to eat more calories? The idea was first sort of thought about 50 years ago, which makes sense if you think about it. The major energy influences come from resting and metabolic rate, however, and this is the energy that it just takes to keep your body switched on and working. So that's rest and digest. It's the stuff that keeps your brain thinking, your cells turning over, and you breathing and keeping your body temperature up. Okay, so that's your basal metabolic rate. So therefore, if there is increase in energy expenditure, there should be a reciprocal drop in body fat unless the caloric intake increases. So there is some nuance behind this. Age, gender, genetic background. Some people are genetically predisposed to early satiety. So if you have a look at Llewellyn 2014 and Wardle et al. 2008, there's real robust evidence to show that certain people, when it comes to eating, will have early satiety. That means that they'll feel fuller more quickly when they start eating, and will feel fuller for longer after they've eaten a meal, which means that these are the guys that you see in the gym that are more likely to be very, very lean, sort of all year round, who have a predisposition to either being very lean or building muscle and staying lean, because they get fuller more quickly and then eat less overall. They end up eating more often in smaller amounts. I had a look at a meta-analysis looking at obesity and overweight people and the direct relationship that an exercise regime will have on their energy intake. Okay, so the studies included people with things like type 2 diabetes, had liver disease, metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, excluded people with severe osteoarthritis, an MSK problem, so that's your musculoskeletal problems, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, things like that would stop them from doing an exercise program, and serious medical conditions like cardiac disease, heart failure, kidney failure, and cancer, things like that. Okay, only exercise interventions were allowed, so there was no cognitive therapy, there was no psychotherapy that went with this, so we weren't looking into things that the rationale for people wanting to eat and why they ate and what's their emotional relationship to food. There were no exercise controls, and participants were free to sort of vary their diet, i.e. they were allowed to pick their diet as they felt fit. Okay. The meta-analysis made up of 48 papers published between 1982 and 2020. Unfortunately, study quality was rated poor, fair and good, and respectively 81% of them were rated poor. So again, we have some evidence here. We've got 15 and 4% of them rated fair and good, which is pretty disappointing. And this is probably because most of the studies lack a randomization, i.e. there's no blinding, so it's prone to bias. And also a lot of the studies had a high dropout rate, i.e. people started their exercise programs and then dropped out as soon as they started it because it was hard. Quelle surprise. So what happens when we look at the exercise groups versus the control? It actually showed there was very little evidence in increasing caloric intake from those who exercised to those in the control group. Now, I should caveat by that in saying these are people who are either overweight or obese, who are starting on an exercise regime of something in the region of 40 minutes to an hour twice a week. Okay, these are not your conditioned athletes. So anyone looking into the study from someone who's already exercising 7 days a week, this doesn't apply. This is the people who are starting out at sedentary level. Okay, so what actually showed was the exercise groups showed a decrease in calorie intake immediately after exercising, and that was across genders. That was both male and female. Appetite ratings generally did not increase in the exercise groups. So what that means is after people exercised, they didn't show a stimulation for wanting to eat more. Okay. A study suggested that this was restraint based on exercise rewards. So, for example, if a patient or a client goes and exercises after the gym, they were like, well, I've just exercised, so I'm not going to eat that donut. Okay. And they were resistant to treats beforehand doing exercise. There was a small correlation in disinhibition and uncontrolled eating. So what that means is that whilst the majority of people were like, I've started on a good habit, and I'm going to continue that good habit, there was a small group of people that they could just go and eat a whole packet of donuts or a whole packet of crisps, or binge eat to an extreme degree. These were the ones that also tended to put on weight during the exercise programs that they were initiated. So that's really interesting, because if you are a clinician or a personal trainer working in this environment with clients, you've got to target these people who have this predisposition to disinhibited eating, and know that if you're going to put someone in an exercise program, if they're prone to that, then they might be more at risk of developing post-exercise eating habits like this. What all this means is that there's suggestion that exercise training regimes in people who are overweight and obese do not on average have an increase in their food intake period when exercise is commenced. So with this small reduction in dietary disinhibition, that's the ability to eat an entire packet of Oreos, for example, after your workout. But to counter this, there was a small and significant number who had improved food reward and preferences after exercise. Okay, so that means they were more prone to seeking out and engaging in health behaviours after starting an exercise regime. I think I'll leave you on one of the studies that was really interesting to me, which was a study that was done on military cadets. So after their exercise regime that they were started on, they were allowed to go into the cafeteria and eat whatever they liked. So this was yogurts, fried food, cereals, pastries, bread, whatever they liked, and there was no limit on how much they could eat. And then they took a before cafeteria attendance appetite questionnaire, and then after the attendance at the cafeteria appetite questionnaire. So interestingly enough, in the overweight arm of the population, the ability to have whatever they wanted from breakfast actually had very little impact on their appetite sensations, i.e. if you let them eat whatever they liked, a very short amount of time later they're still reporting that they're still feeling hungry. So I think the take-home message is, if you are a clinician working with overweight patients, if you are a personal trainer working with overweight clients, you can tell your patients or your clients who are starting at an obese or overweight level, and you can tell them that your increasing exercise or starting on an exercise program isn't going to shoot your appetite up. Okay, Now, we're not talking about, as I said, marathon runners who are going to blast through 2,500 calories in a workout every day. That is going to have an impact on appetite. It has to, because you can't operate if you burn through all the calories you've eaten in a single day. But over the course of a week, if an overweight or obese person is doing 1 or 2 hours an exercise program, working towards their minimum exercise requirements as laid out by the National Health, for example, that would be 75 minutes of vigorous exercise a week. Okay, so if they did that in 2 sessions across the week, then we can confidently say that's not going to increase their appetite, okay, and their energy intake, and they can do that in safety and security, knowing that it's not going to cause massive appetite changes. However, what it does do is has an interplay with psychology. People will start an exercise regime and tighten up their diets as a food reward, okay, or they might go the other way, which is this overeating and overindulgence. So actually, when we're looking at starting people on exercise regimes, we shouldn't be worried about putting them on an exercise regime and saying, this is going to be a problem for your appetite. What we should be saying is actually, it's going to have a negative impact on your energy balance. It's going to have a reduction in your adipose tissue, but also you have to be mindful of your eating, and you kind of have to plan that, as we kind of already knew anyway, the old adage that abs are made in the kitchen. So I think really going forward, for me, one of the understanding points is sitting down with a client and going, like, actually, what is your problem area for eating? What triggers you to eat? Is it an emotional thing? When you feel low, are you prone to binge eating? After you've exercised, you think, oh, actually now I can eat, I can munch through a packet of digestive biscuits, for example. And those are things you have to be sort of aware of and action, I guess, to bring about the changes. Okay guys, thanks for listening. I hope it's been educational. It's lovely weather here, so I'm going to go jump in the pool now. It's just behind this camera, and do some lengths. The next topic that we're going to hopefully cover is around the use of diuretics in training. Okay, so this was a question posed to us by Sarah, who's a championship powerlifter from Wales, and we're going to be looking at it in relation to image and performance enhancing drug use. Okay, whether or not this has impact on mortality. So that was the question she posed to me. So I'm going to go and do some research on that, and that will be in the next podcast. And of course, if you need any intravenous infusions, any vitamins, any health screening, and any sports medicine queries, then of course you can drop them to Kratos Medical on our Instagram, Kratos Medical. Thanks guys, have a great day.